Welcome to the I-80 Boys podcast. I am your co-host, Chris fucking Vacha. And this, look, got a new room. Must have got off his ass and did some work around the house. Who's this guy over here?
Yeah, finally, I finally did something. I just kind of switched some things around, kind of put a little bit of elbow grease, some sweat, and decided to kind of quit being super lazy, and kind of got my room set up here. A nice little backdrop, so that way you don't have to look into the abyss. So hopefully this,
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it, Christian. The only thing I don't like is the team back there, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to like the Iowa hat down at the bottom there either, but no big deal.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
So, Chris, what are we talking about today, bud?
I think we're gonna playoff predictions. Our top four, I believe, who's going to make the playoff this year. Well, it would be 2024, 2023 season. Christian, would you like to lead us off, or do you want me to go in first?
You know what, brother? I'll go in first here. All right. Okay.
You shock the world here.
Hunt's not like the ketchup, but like my last name. My playoff predictions here. I kind of went, there's kind of a couple different strategies. You can play it really safe. I feel like when you do a lot of these playoff projections and what have you. I personally did not want to go that route. I wanted to kind of really think about this, and I wanted to really make sure that I'm doing the thing justice. So here we go. Without further review, I've got number one. I'm going to go LSU. I think LSU, this is a revenge season for them. I think they go to work, they go to town, and they take care of the SEC. Not only do they win the SEC championship, but they'll end up being the number one seed. I got number two. I've got Ohio State. I think, again, Ohio State's going to get their quarterback situation figured out. I think they're going to run roughshod over the Big Ten, and I don't think it's even going to be close this year. We talked about that on previous pods. I think it's going to set up really, really well for them, and it's going to be a dismantling what Ohio State will do. They'll be the second best team this year. Number three, give me USC. Now, I know we've kind of been a little down on Caleb Williams. However, I will say this. I think the guy is I think he's going to do enough. I think Lincoln Riley out there in the, what is that, the Pac-10 or Pac-12, sorry, should I say?
Yep.
At the Pac-12, I think he's going to, I don't know, man. I think everything's kind of lining up for them to kind of reload and kind of win the Pac-12 this year and potentially get into the playoffs and kind of right the ship there. And lastly, at number four, I've got Clemson. Now, I like Clemson in there at the fourth spot. I think, again, they got a kid in Cade Klubnik who's going to be taking over. With Clemson, really, they were exactly a quarterback away from kind of getting back to being relevant. I mean, we talk about that all the time. As a Falcons fan, I can tell you right now, to kind of give you a comparison here, there are some teams that are not exactly a quarterback away from winning. Clemson is not one of them. They're a talented school. Dare I say they're almost an SEC caliber school, if I can really say that, out there in the SEC or in the ACC. And like I said, I think they're going to get everything kind of back on pace. They've got a talented running back in Will Shipley. I think they're going to end up, blowing past Florida State this year and kind of making it back into the playoffs where they belong. Chris, what are your thoughts?
The LSU is a I would say, I guess to me, is a bold prediction there, but I like it. I do. I like LSU this year as well. The seeding thing. I mean, we know how they seed this. Could get mixed around a little bit. We saw what happened last year. I thought Michigan and Ohio State should have played first in that playoff game. But we did have that conversation on here earlier. But I will say LSU's a big one, man, and they're going to be a damn good team. The rest of that, I guess I really can't argue too much with, because with USC, there's your Pac-12 winner there that you have. And we'll get into mine here in a second. I like Oregon coming out of there, but I think you would agree Oregon is pretty formidable this year. I think another team is Washington too. I believe they're rated preseason top 10 probably. So that one I understand. I'm not really the LSU one shocks me a little bit. The big thing that shocks me more than anything, Christian, where the fuck are your Georgia Bulldogs? All that shit in the background, and you made them in the playoff back to back. What 2-time national champs? Explain that to me, sir.
First of all, sir, we are the 4-time national champion of the world. But yeah, we are back to back. Just like World War champs, we're back to back champions. I mean, here's the reality of the situation, Chris, and that is, I had to kind of make up for my sins. I had to kind of go back there and buy a bunch of stuff because I couldn't include them. Again, I still think, and I'll always say this, I think they're going to have to figure out the quarterback position this year. Do I think going from Monken to Bobo? I mean, Bobo, really, last time Bobo was here, Georgia didn't have, and they had good defenders, but they weren't on this level with Kirby Smart. I still think they're going to have to figure out, they've kind of been slacking in the run game in years past, I feel like.
I agree.
And I think when you break in a new quarterback, especially in the SEC, you kind of have to be able to run the ball a little bit and kind of just get him up to par. I mean, Stetson Bennett is a guy who, I'm very, very high on, that they're losing, that played a ton of football. I mean, so that's not a guy you really have to worry about kind of not throwing the ball a lot or whatever have you, right? So I think with some of these younger quarterbacks with Georgia, I just think it's going to be kind of like Alabama. You look at Alabama. I mean, they've won, I think, a couple of times. Have they won a couple of times back to back? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. They've done it. I think they've done it twice, maybe 3 times if you go back in the 70s or whenever they had Bear Bryant.
And I'll kind of touch a little more on this on a later segment, but yeah, I think for this, I think LSU, to me, they get a lot more returning production. And I think it's just going to be interesting to see what they do. I really like them this year, and what I think is going to be a very surprising finish to the SEC this year. I'll just put it that way.
No, like I said, that one, I mean, throws me a little bit of a loop with your Georgia pick, but without them being in there. But LSU, though, is definitely going to be formidable. I'm big on Jalen Daniels this year. We all know that. Obviously, we had that podcast a few episodes ago. But you ready for mine, Christian? I'll jump right into it.
Yeah, let's see what you got there, you old. Hold on 1 second here.
Yeah,
let's see what you got there, you old Lithuanian lot lizard.
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
Holy shit, that's out of my out of my realm with that verbiage there. But no, I don't have it up on my screen right now. But the way I got it is I got Michigan up top at number 1, and I know that's going to piss you off. You think they're going to suck. I got Bama at 2, and you could interchange those. No big deal. Then Ohio State, and then I got Oregon. I'll start with Alabama. I'm really high on Alabama this year. I know a lot of people are down on them. They don't return a ton. They're going to have a new quarterback this year. They have no Bryce Young coming back. I mean, or not Bryce Young, but what the hell's his name? Jesus, Bryce Young. Sorry. They're it's going to be an interesting year. I just think Saban, after last year not making the playoffs, I just feel like he's going to have that staff and his team motivated as ever. So I'm like I said, I'm riding high on Bama this year. I'll probably end up putting my foot in my mouth later on in the season, but obviously I'll jump down to Michigan. And the reason why I have Michigan, I'll just actually tie both of those in together, Michigan and Ohio State. I said it on a previous podcast. I truly believe these two teams are going to be undefeated when they play each other this year again. I think Michigan comes out on top. They don't lose a ton off that team. I'm very high on them. Ohio State, they're gonna have a new quarterback this year. It's going to be interesting who they got back there, but I still think those two teams are clearly the best two teams in the Big Ten, obviously, and I think they're both going to get the nod again this year. I know that's a really bold take, probably piss some people off there. And then with Oregon, this one I struggled with, and I think you could throw a lot of teams in here. Like I just said earlier, Christian, I said Washington, USC. I put my foot down earlier, this year, and I said I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12, so I'm going to keep it that way. I didn't put anybody in from the ACC, and what I see from the ACC is I see North Carolina being very relevant this year with Drake May coming back. I'm a big Mac Brown fan. I think Florida State is going to be damn good this year, and Clemson. And like you said, you touch on a good topic. Clemson, it's kind of funny. Most people think they're in the SEC. It seems like they've been up there the last how many fucking years now. with Dabo. He's a hell of a coach. They had a down year last year by their standards. I'm sure in most people's opinions, theirs as well. So I would honestly say that. So that's where, like I said, that 4 seed to me, that could be Oregon. Pac-12 could be completely left out of that, or it could be an ACC school. So you surprised about anything here, Christian? Because I know you are.
Well, there's so much. I mean, we've gone round and round. I feel as if kind of talking about Alabama and Michigan, kind of to refresh everybody. Chris is really high on Michigan. He's really high on Bama. To use his words, he is a dick riding son of a bitch. I mean, I think he would probably, if I could have a painting of two like centaur-like guys, and one of them is Nick Saban and the other one is Jim Harbaugh, and send that to him, I really think he would display it above his mantle and his headboard in his master bedroom there. I really think he would.
Dude, yeah, for sure. I mean, that is way to paint the picture there. I appreciate that for the audience. Yeah, no, I'm with you though, Christian. Like I said, though, I am big. I am very big on Alabama. I'm very big on Michigan again this year. We'll see what happens though. Like I said, this is, like it says, it's way too early, but we're gonna, like I said, I will admit it when I'm wrong, and there's a damn good chance Michigan don't even, maybe make the playoffs and LSU gets in there, and are you surprised that both of us didn't have Georgia in there? I know obviously you made yours and you're not, but are you surprised that I have Georgia in there? I mean, back to back. I know they lose some people.
Yeah, I am. Listen, and I talk about this a lot. There's different words for it. There's two kinds of Georgia fans, really, if you will, and it's kind of like most fan bases. I know you can relate to this as a Nebraska fan. We call them Disney dogs, and they're the kind of people that they have the rose-colored glasses on, and they say, well, Georgia can do no wrong. I mean, we're losing a ton of production like we do every year. But we're losing a quarterback who's won 2 back-to-back national champions and was a huge part of this last one, in Stetson Bennett, and really the win over at Alabama the year prior. And we're just going to keep on chugging and lugging along. And we're losing Todd Monken, who was arguably the kind of guy that came to Georgia and started to open the offense up for us. And things are going to be perfect. We're going to be all right. And I simply, to that, say, it's tough, man. I don't see it. I'm more of a realist in it. I know you've been really, really high on Georgia, probably a lot more higher than I have been. I've got Georgia pegged at, probably somewhere. I keep going back and forth between 10-2, 9-3.
Right.
I think they, again, and I've said it in a previous show, but to me, I think South Carolina is going to shock some folks this year. I think Tennessee can probably get them this year. And I don't know, man. I think if I'm not mistaken, do they play Ole Miss? I think they might.
I think they do. But yeah, no, I know it's just interesting, hearing it from, a big time Georgia fan like yourself. I do give you kudos of being a realist. I'm the same way when it comes to Nebraska as well. So I'll give you some props on that though. But would it shock you, I guess, Christian, is my question. Mm-hmm. If Georgia would make the playoffs, like, you know what I mean? Would you be blown out of the water? Like, damn, that's a good season for us coming off the back to back. I don't think anybody's ever won 3, if I'm not mistaken. So unless you're talking way back, maybe in the early days, I think we had that discussion once, but I mean, would it shock you? I guess my question is if they did crack the playoff.
No, it really wouldn't shock me if that happened. I mean, are you trying to get me to bet on here against my team? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, I'm not actually for once. We got a lot of bets on the table. I mean, I was just curious because, like, I remember the days when Nebraska, they won 3 out of 4, right? And that was our dynasty era there back in the 90s. I was just, like when we didn't make it in 96, we had 2 losses, it was just like heartbreaking, right? And I was a pretty young guy then, but actually, I was just saying, like, with you guys, coming off that back-to-back and then not make the playoffs, would that be considered a failure, to your guys' standards that you guys have set? And I think that'll bring us into our next topic here pretty soon. But
yeah, you know what? I'll kind of elaborate on this. I actually don't. It wouldn't shock me. I'm gonna say that right now. It wouldn't shock me it would shock me if they did, because I think if you go back and you look at it, I mean, how often? And granted, they've had some guys that have kind of sat there for a couple of years and kind of learned, but have they really played in meaningful games? And that's the real thing. I mean, how many times do you see that in college football where you go into the playoffs and it's a first year starter. I mean, it happens. I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me was Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
That one comes to me. But I mean, you think about it, I don't know. Do I think they're going to have an LSU like post Joe Burrow kind of fall off there? No, I don't think that is the case at all without Stetson Bennett. But I do think, like I said, I think to set realistic expectations, I just think they're going to kind of have to learn some stuff and they're going to take some steps forward. And we're just going to see what happens with it. They got a ton of talent at the quarterback position, but I think that's going to be the ultimate sort of question mark going forward this year. Really, for me, and I'll say this, I want to kind of slow it down a little bit on this. I think Bama is really the more surprising thing. I mean, we've talked about it. I'm not really super sold on Jalen Milroe, the quarterback there for him yet. I think he can run around. He's a good athlete, but I'm not sold on him. And they've got some other guys coming in, if I'm not mistaken, Ty Simpson, and they've got some of these guys that are really, really young, really green. I mean, I've said this. I think this year sets up for – they're talented. They're a very talented school, and they're a very talented team, and they've got not arguably, they have the best coach in all of college football history, roaming that sidelines. But I don't know, man. To me, this just seems like a trap year for them. I'm not saying they're going to fall off and have like a Texas A&M like season. That's kind of that's pushing it. I just don't see a situation because the West is really a loaded division out there in the SEC. Man, I don't see them getting back to an SEC championship this year.
No, and I could see. I think I think a majority of the audience or most college football fans would probably agree with you. I'm just going the opposite route of that. The other side of the coin. I thought last year was their year where they were down. You know what I mean? And I think they had obviously higher standards than what ended ultimately happening. But I think Nick Saban, just knowing the guy, watching him over the last how many freaking years now. Just how upset he was about it. I know he doesn't play the game. He coaches the game. And like you said, he is the greatest coach to ever roam a sideline in college football for sure. But I think the unknown for them, it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing, right? Yeah. Monroe, we haven't seen a lot out of him. He is a tremendous athlete, ripped son of a bitch, man. The guy looks like he should be in a bodybuilding show. But yeah, we haven't seen a lot out of him. He came in a little bit for Bryce Young last year when he was hurt up and down, and he showed some flashes of, like, okay, this kid can play at this level on this team. They did lose some guys, though. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is a big one at running back. I think he is a stud. That's going to be tough to fill. The receivers last year, I thought, and I hate to say this, but I thought they sucked last year. Alabama has been putting out wide receivers for the last 8 years now, every fucking draft. So, like, I think they're going to have some guys in there that can play. Defense is where I literally 100% is their make or break, I guess, if you will. You know what I mean? They were terrible last year. Didn't look like a Saban defense last year. They gave up a lot of points to a lot of teams. Saban, I understand that the last few years, he hasn't been that top prominent back in the, God, what was it? 2012, whenever it was when they were battling LSU all the goddamn time. Yeah. Those defense, they were low scoring games. It was like fucking 9-3, Yeah. I know times have changed a little bit with the offenses and the quarterbacks down there, but their defense has got to get better. Their defense was atrocious last year. So I think they do get better in that regard. And that's where I do think they win some of those close games this year. I know Texas is a big one that I believe we had a bet on that one with Texas and Bama. But like I said, it is interesting. Like I said, I know I'm kind of going against the grain here of the general, public.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's you took the very pedestrian route with it, if I could say so. The only one you really kind of went out on a limb there with was Oregon. I don't hate it. I don't hate it because I like Dan Lanning. He's a Georgia guy. Yeah.
Bo Nix? All those guys? Like you're writing them off for you know what? You know who you're dick riding? You're dick riding Caleb Williams, dude.
Oh my God.
No, you've been dick riding that guy. Last year I heard you talk about him. I might as well come out here on air in public and just say that he's going to win another Heisman too while you're at it. Come on.
I don't think that. But here's the reality of it. Speaking of that, I put out a poll on our community page on YouTube, and one of the things that they talked about, on that poll was who's going to win the Heisman this year. Who it was? Caleb Williams. It was
Drake May. I think we had in there.
Drake May. Bo Nix, and then it was someone else, or someone else other, right? Bo Nix is the only one that did not get a single vote yet.
And that actually kind of does surprise me a little bit now that you bring that up. But I just like Oregon this year, man. I really do. That ass pounding they took early in the year from last year, I think Bo Nix probably grew from that. I thought Oregon looked a lot better after that game. I mean, what was the score of that game, Christian? You should know that. That thing was an ass beating, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was early in the year. Do you remember the score of that game? I mean, wasn't it like 45-7 or some shit like that? Or, maybe I'm off, maybe 42-10 or something like 42-14 or some shit like that. But regardless, I mean, it was an ass beating. I mean, Oregon got pounded. And I think you get, like I said, another year with Bo Nix. He's played a lot of college football now. Veteran QB, you know how I am about that stuff, returning your quarterback. I think they're going to get it done, man, this year. I do. And like I said, maybe I'm a little biased against USC because I just don't like them. But I think another team, would it surprise you if Washington got in?
I can see it. I mean, like I said, I like their quarterback a lot. I think they're going to have a shot. I mean, they really are, dude. I could see them. Like I said, the Pac-12 is going to have some shocking teams this year, for sure. It's a toss up though. I mean, I think really I like Penix Jr. more than I like Bo Nix.
Okay.
But again, I think it's a situation where we're really just going to have to see how it shakes out. I really don't see a scenario though, Chris, where, man, if Dan Lanning could get them, I'll say this: if Dan Lanning gets them back into the playoffs year 2, dude, that's going to be strong.
No, and I agree. And I'm going to flip gears here real quick before we switch to our other topic here. But, I feel like I'm hating, I guess, a little bit on the ACC. You put Clemson in there, which I could definitely see happening. I mean, Dabo is probably, if not one of the top 3 coaches in college football the last 10 years, without a doubt, with his success there. But what about Florida State? I feel we're kind of leaving those guys out a little bit. I mean, what's your thoughts on them this year?
I think Florida State is, I don't know. Florida State's a weird team to me. Like I said, I think they're a situation where with Mike Norvell, you start getting really high on Florida State and they just let you down. They just can let you down and they figure out new ways to do it. I think this sets up for it. Or they have some weird freak injury where like Jordan Travis, they're good.
Super stud.
Yeah, they're super stud quarterback that they've got gets hurt like game 2 or 3 or something like that. And then we're talking about what could have been and just, I think that's how that goes. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm going to leave you with one more question here. What about UNC? I know a lot of people are writing them off this year. I know Drake May, they always have like ridiculously good offenses over there and put up crazy numbers, but just never can win those big games. What's your thoughts on them this year? I just want to hear your thoughts before we move on here.
Yeah. Like I said, I like Drake May. I think he's got a really, really good shot, this year at winning a Heisman. But do I think UNC can kind of take those steps forward? I mean, Mac Brown's a guy. I mean, he won a national championship. Granted, it was during the BCS era.
Yeah.
In North Carolina, we're
talking about getting some studs on that offense, though, bro. I mean, I know you got to be able to play defense. That's where I'm really off on them.
I can probably give him a long shot. You know what I mean? I'll put him up there. To me, like I said, I think Dabo is kind of a little bit more relevant as a coach, and I think they've got a better roster top to bottom. And I like them. Like I said, man, I like Clemson. I'm a lot more heavy on Clemson. I think getting back to it this year.
Okay, and then I actually have another one now. Now that we just touched on it, real quick, do you see a team outside of Power 5 getting in, like a Tulane or? God, I can't use TCU because they're in the Big 12, but do you see a team outside of that? Do you see anybody this year that you kind of think maybe long shot? Tulane gets Pratt back. Some of those guys, head coach is still there. I feel like we don't show enough love probably to some of those schools, but like a Cincinnati or somebody like that, maybe a Central Florida. Hell, I don't know, but they're all from the same conference if I'm not mistaken. But yeah. Do you see any chances, any thoughts? I mean, would that surprise you? It would surprise the fuck out of me personally. But, I mean, would it surprise you at all, Christian?
No, I mean, I don't think it would. I mean, Cincinnati was kind of a trailblazer in this. TCU, I mean, TCU, you almost can't really put TCU and Cincinnati in the same boat.
No, agreed.
I mean, just because they are in the Big 12. And to me, you could make the argument for Tulane. Tulane has by far one of the easiest schedules comparatively.
So if they run the table,
yeah.
What was it? Were they 12-1 last year? Some shit like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, once they run the table this year, they deserve a chance to get in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if they run the table this year, because they're going to play Ole Miss at home, which we've already talked about. That's a weird.
They should be good this year too. Ole Miss should be. I'm high on them this year.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that is an interesting game. I kind of hope when we do, we're going to put it up for everybody so they can kind of, dictate what games we kind of live stream and what games we kind of break down. But I really hope that's one of the games that we end up having to do, because I'd really love to kind of cover that and talk about that.
Okay. I got no more arguments with you on this one. So, where are we going here?
In that case, let's jump into our favorite topic around here, and that's our hot take segment.
Yes.
All righty. So our hot take for this week is Georgia has surpassed Bama and is the college football new gold standard. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yes. I think it's without a doubt. The reason why I'm saying this is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think, Georgia, with the back-to-back there, if they would have like won, not won, and then won one again, I'd say no. But the back-to-back thing here to me is huge. I think they're only the 7th team ever to do so. I think since like the 1930s. That's impressive. I mean, it really truly is. And I say this because I'm a true Nebraska fan, and we did it back in 94, 95. We didn't win in 96, but then turn around won in 97. We were considered a dynasty then. Bama has been the dynasty the last how many years, and I think you would agree with that. You sprinkle in a little bit of Clemson in there with the Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence in those days. But Georgia overall to me is what they're doing with Kirby Smart, man. He is almost like Nick Saban 2.0. They're not the same people, don't get me wrong. But the way they coach, the way they build those teams, Georgia's pretty much replicated, what Bama has done, on the offensive side of the ball. Definitely on the defensive side of the ball, and that's what I give kudos to Georgia for that. I do. And I just think that Saban now in his age, he's getting up there, eventually he will have to retire. And I am high on Bama this year. I just see Georgia as now like that gold standard. I do. I mean, you look at, I believe they lost a couple of years ago when they won their first one. I believe they lost 15 players selected in the draft that next year, if I'm not mistaken, still reloaded last year and still came out there and won a national title. And that to me is like, okay, that's not just returning, every single person, a majority of people that you won the first year to your second year, like kind of like what Nebraska kind of did that in 94 to 95. You know what I mean? It pretty much kept a lot of those big name pieces. Georgia lost quite a bit to the draft, came back and still won. And that's where it's on Kirby Smart, where I think their coaching staff is just amazing over there. And we could say the same thing about Saban. He's always had great coaches in that program. We all know that. We could name the long list of fucking guys, including Kirby Smart, in that whole program. So, yeah, I guess to me, it's not even close. I mean, this question to me is pretty black and white to me. This year, if Bama would happen to win a national title, I think that would kind of bring that closer again, but we'd have to see, that's hypothetically speaking. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Christian, you being a Georgia fan as one.
Well, listen, I think you're absolutely right. And we don't agree all the time, I feel like, on this, but I will say this. I think you said it perfect. When we talk about the gold standard, I mean, you look at what some of these Alabama teams have done. They'll win one, then they'll have a year off. Then they'll win 1, 2, then they'll have a year off. Then they'll, and they're always a year or two kind of, they never go really more than a couple of years without kind of getting back and winning it again and just running the table and reloading. And I really think when you stop for a second and you think about this, I think that's exactly where Georgia's at. Sometimes it's about luck, really it is. And really for Georgia, they've got talent in that quarterback room. I mean, there is some embarrassment of riches. Alabama's got some good quarterbacks too, and they've had a lot of good quarterbacks. I think when it comes to Georgia, are they the gold standard in college football? Yes, simply because I like the future. Like you said, Kirby's a younger guy.
He is.
I think this year he doesn't win he doesn't three-peat this year, but I think that drives him to get back into the lab and keep cooking and keep getting that motivation back. It's like a championship fighter. You get a guy in the UFC or you get a guy who's a boxer and they go on a very long, very historic run. Sometimes, they get a little too high on themselves. They get fed, they get paid. Now all of a sudden their motivations are
Isn't that human nature though? You know what I mean?
Yes, it is. And you got to really, it's hard. It's hard to get up when you've got, not a care in the world. You got a pool in the backyard. You've got the big TV. You've got everything taken care of in life. The grind is not the same as when you're living out of a studio apartment.
Right.
And the bills are coming due. I mean, so there's two different things. And I kind of feel like that's kind of where George is at right now.
No, and I agree. And like I said, I like I said, we don't always agree on this topic, but I'm about 100% sure, on this deal that like when you look at Georgia, and they could have had a better hire than Kirby Smart. You guys were not trash before you got him there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You guys were always like a goddamn game away from being the LSU and cracking the top four or even Bama those years. You know what I mean? We could go back to all the times that Georgia and Alabama played each other, and it's always been a crazy game. It just always felt like Georgia was on the other end of the stick there, right? And I'm with you, man. With Kirby, man, that guy, I love hearing him talk. I like his motivational speeches. If anybody ever I don't know if you go to like Twitter or YouTube and watch some of his shit before a game, man, it is fucking intense, man. I love it. And like you said, it's human nature to me, though, man. One back-to-back, it's hard not to creep into your head, as a player, as a programmer, as a fan base. I remember, hell, I was 11 and 12 when we went back-to-back. I didn't think anybody was going to fucking beat us for 5 years. You know what I mean? And, 96, we lost 2 games. And we lost the 3rd game of the year to Arizona State, like 9-2 or some shit. And, it is. And, what did Nebraska do, though? Went back to the lab. Scott Frost, second year quarterback, run the table again and win another one. Get the 3 out of the 4. So that's a really good analogy there, and it's a really good take.
Yeah. I mean, do you have anything else to add on this? I don't think this was that much of a hot take on my end, by the way.
No, it wasn't. It was a good topic, though. And like I said, I hope people drop some comments in here, and I would like to hear other people's thoughts on this. But obviously, me and you agree on this one, so it's probably not as interesting. But I thought it was a good topic to touch on, though. But other than that, I got nothing else, Christian.
Yeah, and I think this is going to bring us to a good ending point for the show. So, again, guys, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Peace.